All right, tight lug nut, meet fully charged battery. What's up guys, James from Sikky Manufacturing. As you can see, we got our FRS back here on the lift, so that means we're gonna dive into some more vehicle specific modifications, further prepping for this LS swap. Plus we're gonna jump into a little project that kind of got thrown our way on the side here that actually has to do with the FRS and the rear end of this car. So I'll get into that in a minute. But first step, we're gonna actually do the solid Sikky steering rack bushing install on this. So those of you who don't know much about the way we designed our kit or haven't watched that kit design video, if you haven't, I recommend going and checking that out. And don't forget to subscribe while you're poking around on our YouTube channel. But either way, these bushings are designed to work for left and right hand drive cars and allows you to move the steering rack kind of in a circular motion up or down, left or right, and allows you to get a little bit of extra clearance on the steering rack. Since our headers are designed with an 1 7/8" primary, it's quite a lot of header fitting through this small engine compartment, so that articulation of the steering rack allows us to get that extra clearance and still not contact or rattle or rub or bang into anything. So really simple installation, but let's get after that right now. This stuff comes with your Sikky headers, so there's a possibility we might sell these bushings on their own. They come in handy for other applications, even other swaps. Not to mention the improvement for you guys that are full track use. Just removing that slop from the steering can help get a little more feel to the road. So either way, they could be on the site at some point individually. At the moment, you can only get them when you buy the headers, but either way, you're gonna find them in your hardware kit, which is gonna look like this inside your header box. So we've got the 2 bushings. Can't go without the koozie for your cold ones. The other half of the V-band and the V-band clamps for your headers. Brand new hardware. And of course, last but not least, brand new header gaskets. But all we're concerned with right now are these 2 little bushings. So if you open up your bag, you're gonna see they're exactly the same, so you don't have to worry there's no left or right. Again, these are machined here at Sikky, 6061 built aluminum. And you can see the holes offset, so as you rotate this, it moves the rack accordingly. So you'll notice, see if I can get real close here. I'm not sure if it's gonna show up in the video, but there's a left-hand drive engraved right here, and when it's vertical, like you can read it the way you normally would, that's in the left-hand drive position. Doesn't mean you have to put it here. You can rotate them and use your own freedom to put it where exactly you want it, but either way, you flip it over, and you can see now there's a RHD for right-hand drive on top, and that pushes the rack in the appropriate direction for a right-hand drive vehicle. All right, so first step to get these factory bushings out so we can install the Sikky ones. We're gonna unbolt this support here to the front subframe, then unbolt the rack. That way we can get it low enough to press the bushings out. All right, sway bar's down out of the way. Now we just gotta take these 2 17mm bolts out.
All right, so at this point, depending on how you're gonna end up pressing these bushings out, this is low enough. We've got everything out of the way. If you don't disconnect this steering column from the steering rack, then you don't have to mess with the steering alignment sensor. If you disconnect it, then it's gonna have to be recalibrated, which would happen if you got a professional alignment done anyway. So either way, we're gonna do this without unhooking the steering column from the rack, just to kind of save a little bit of time until we get it to the alignment rack. But for now, it's, we're gonna press it out in place right where they are so we can press in the new Sikky bushings. All right, so quick and easy method, use an 8-inch C-clamp, big socket, and slide this up on here and crank away. It's hard in the beginning, but once you break past this point here, it'll go easier. So if you don't have a big socket, you can also use a big chunk of pipe like this. Just got to make sure it's the right length. So that's what it looks like when you press it out. Pretty easy to get out. You could also help by spraying a little bit of like quick lube on there, some kind of penetrant, because this will just grease up this side on the way through, but it comes out pretty easy. And I use a C-clamp just because I figured most people will have that around. You might be able to get away with a 6-inch. That was an 8-inch. You can get them Harbor Freight for like 20 bucks. We have a fancy hydraulic press here, but I figured most people aren't going to have that, so we'll show the more of a backyard mechanic. But there's any way you can think of to get the bushing out. Either way, it comes out real easy. All right, so if you don't have a C-clamp, you could take a smaller bolt that doesn't have the big washer, so it doesn't overhang this. Just as long as it's not bigger than that center piece, lube this up a little bit. And take a big pry bar. And press your bushing out that way. Now what we got to do then is get the bolt we used out of here. So you can see I just found a bolt I had laying around the shop that had a small enough head, and then you just use the leverage of the pry bar to press the bushing right out. All right, so before you put the Sikky bushing in, just make sure you clean out the hole, make sure there's no burrs or big gouges or something, depending on how you took it out. I mean, there shouldn't be, but you just want to make sure it's a smooth bore in here, ready for the install of the Sikky bushing. So these billet steering rack bushings are provided when you buy Sikky headers. Just gives you a little more clearance on some things, and pretty simple. So you have a left-hand drive. If you read that the right way, that means that's going to be up. And if for our right-hand drive customers, you flip this over, offsets the rack that way. It just adds a little extra clearance for the steering column. Basically, real simple. It's a nice machined billet aluminum part. It's a press fit, so you're going to line it up once you get the rack up into position and press it in. If you're careful with the alignment, you can actually use a dead blow to tap it in. Doesn't make much difference how this is clocked at this point, because we designed this so you can put a wrench on here and rotate it to exactly flat. Your goal is to get this line perpendicular to the subframe or the ground. That just means you've got maximum shift of the rack to the one side. And we're gonna repeat the same process for this side. Again, left-hand drive facing up. There you go, perfect slip fit. All right, so now we're gonna take the factory bolts you took out, get the rack, you gotta kind of manipulate it back up into position. I'm going to get both bolts started before we tighten them up. And now's when you want to take a wrench and get these bushings completely parallel to the ground using this line as a reference. You can even use just the flat face of the bottom side of this. You can see pretty easily too how it does manipulate the position of the rack. So as we rotate it, moves the rack down and over, up and over, depending on which way you're turning it. Now we've got both bushings flat, we just got to tighten up the rack. All right, as you can see, not a bad install at all. Took probably 20 minutes max. Depending on what method you use to press the bushings out, it could be more difficult than the other, but either way, pretty simple. I wouldn't let that intimidate you. Just again to recap, this is to provide adequate clearance to the headers. Yes, technically you could put the headers in the car without doing that, but you're going to be running a really tight tolerance between the header and the steering rack, or the steering column where it connects to the rack. So it's a perfectly good modification to do these cars. I wouldn't hesitate to do it, and it's highly recommended for the proper clearance at the headers. That way, as the engine's moving and torquing, there's no fear of contact with the steering column or anything like that. So real basic, but it's time to move on to the next item on this. All right, as you can see, I'm now standing at the back of the FRS. So this is where this episode is going to deviate a little bit from the stuff required to do an LS swap. Now, this particular modification is actually going to help with your car getting traction and maybe even reducing wheel hop a little bit. But either way, long story short, a buddy of ours that runs the Sikky products on his LS swapped FRS reached out to us, was struggling with some wheel hop issues. We already make solid aluminum subframe bushings. The bushings go between the subframe and the chassis, but we didn't currently make anything for the differential. So we figured it was a great opportunity to dive into the design and install and testing of these, and then we're going to ship a set out to him to do the same thing and get some feedback from him, but give you a quick little sneak peek into the design process on a bushing from prototyping all the way to installation. So that'll probably be peppered out through a couple episodes just because I want to keep these rolling for you guys and keep the updates steady. So this episode, we're going to get into just pulling the rear out and maybe a little bit of the design side, and then I'll show a little bit of the manufacturing and test fitting side, so on a further episode down the line. But either way, I'm going to jump into getting this rear end pulled out of here so we can actually get these bushings out of the subframe. So let's get it done. Probably a million ways to do this, but what first step I'm going to do is get these wheels and tires off. And I'm just going to show you this on one side, but we're going to basically get this suspension to the point where we can swing it out a little bit to get some slack on the axle. We're going to disconnect enough of the suspension on the bottom where we can kind of swing this whole hub out and disc assembly to get that axle to the point where it'll disengage from the rear and drop out of the way. So here we go. Jeez, well. Oh damn, somebody used a heavyweight to put these on. Oh. That's what the problem is. Time for a battery. Cut. All right, tight lug nut, meet fully charged battery. Damn, what a difference. Huh. All right, so again, I'm trying to do as little work as possible here. So I just need to disconnect, and I also don't want to have to do a rear alignment anytime soon. I mean, obviously before this car gets like some serious road usage, it'll get an alignment, but for now we just need to get the axle out, the rear out, and then get it all back together without, and still having it be able to be moved around. So, which should be pretty easy. There's quite a few ways to do that. But I'm gonna probably start with this lower control arm right here. And that might, I'll be trying there. That might get us enough to just be able to pull back on this thing and get it to move. Worst case, this front trailing arm. And that's 17. All right, so looks like I'm gonna have to do this lower control arm right here too, or the trailing arm, I should say. I can't even pull that bolt out without getting that guy out of the way. Look at the shock while we're at it. And sway bar end link. So if we get this, I actually forgot we're gonna have to get that out anyways to be able to swing that bar out of the way. But that should allow this lower control arm to droop. And 14. If you're ever tapping on the end of a bolt to get it out, just make sure you always put the nut back on. I mean, if you're wailing on it, then there's not much going to help, but makes it easy so you're not messing threads up. All right. See if we get any kind of, there we go. See how good that moves out. Have plenty of swing. This will allow us to pull out and the axles can drop down. So I'm not gonna show you this on the other side, but it's the same thing, basically. All right, to avoid a unwanted shower of gear oil, which is never fun, I'm gonna drain this fluid out here before we go to pop these axles out. Shit. Damn, that's a strong magnet. Good news is there's not much on here, which looks like the rear's in pretty good shape. Fluid looks really good. Doesn't smell great, but it never does. All right, that's good enough. This magnet is insane. I don't know if this is factory or not. It's got some magnets.com. This thing's ridiculous. It's even hard to install. Can't even get it to go in the freaking hole. There we go. Feel free to leave a comment if you guys think that's a factory rear drain. I honestly can't remember what normally is on these things, but if it's an aftermarket one, in my opinion, haven't worked on cars my whole life, that's a good sign somebody gave a shit enough to put a highly powerful magnet in their rear. Then they're probably looking out for the best interest of the car. So I could be wrong, but it doesn't feel like a factory. At least I've never seen one with a magnet that crazy on it. All right, so this is where the step before with undoing the suspension is important. This is like the C-clip style where the end of the axle actually goes into the limit or the differential. So we're gonna need to pop this out. Typically, you just wanna find somewhere, you obviously wanna break an ear off of the rear or something weird like that, so just find a good spot for it. And usually you can just give it a little pop. Try that again. Nope. That does not want to pop out easily. Damn. Doing something wrong here. I'm blowing my shoulder out trying to push this thing up. Oh, the other side popped right out. Let's try this again. There we go. All right, so don't be afraid to give that thing some force. I just put about everything I had behind it to get that C-clip to pop. So this is where that previous step comes into play, where you need to be able to swing suspension out far enough to get that axle to drop out. So there you go. So we'll repeat that, get the axle on the other side, and then we're ready to start unbolting this rear. All right, so since my forearm blocked the action on that other one, I'm gonna repeat over here. We'll basically just, come on. God damn, hey, don't do that. So now once you get it broke out of there, I'm gonna push on this suspension and get it all the way over. Whew. Fun times. All right, so there's 3 bolts holding on the back here. You got 2 on this driver's side and then 1 on the passenger, and then there's 2 more bolts on the ears up front. So I'm gonna use those to hold the rear up in while I get these back ones out. But these should hopefully come right out. There we go, back end is free. Give you guys a close-up of this factory bushing. You can see why it's probably gonna make a pretty big difference having these aluminum ones in here. These things are pretty tore up. As you can see, I mean, this thing definitely taking a beating. Those are deep cracks that look like they go just about all the way in. Let's see if I can get in here without getting out of focus, but yeah. Either way, that thing's been moving a lot to the point where it's tearing. This side doesn't look as bad, but you never know what the other side of the bushing looks like either. All right, so I'm gonna attempt to take this thing out of here by myself. Could be the worst decision ever, but shop side of things is busy, so I'm not gonna stop and ask somebody for a hand. Worst case, you guys have a pretty entertaining action to watch here as this thing falls out of here like a bomb. Assuming I can support the back, unbolt the front, and then take both hands and lower it out, but we'll see how this goes. Fingers crossed. Might be a lot of cussing here in a minute. And those are 19s. All right, there's some of the weight. There's a whole lot more weight. All right, that's not gonna work. I'm gonna lower this thing down a little bit. And holy shit, this thing's kind of heavy. Oh, God damn. Got it. Whew. All right, so there's your prize for all that hard work. So the rear bushings on these, the Toyotas in general, are very similar. We make bushing kits for SC300 and the Supra, and they look a lot like this. We did some preliminary measurements just to say like, hey, what are the odds that these are the same as the Supra or the SC? And fortunately they're close, but they're different. So we're gonna develop the bushings based off of the geometry in the FRS BRZs and do some scanning, probably the first step. Looks like it comes with these big washers on top. Goes between the chassis and this rubber part of the bushing that's sticking up here. Yeah. Next step is do some CAD, some design, some measurement with the ferro arm, and we'll come up with some prototypes, then machine them and install them. But I think that's a good place to wrap this episode, so we'll pick up where we left off on the next one. Thanks for watching. Like always, like, subscribe, leave a comment, let us know what you think about the channel and the content we're putting out there. We appreciate the feedback. See you next time.